Formula 1 season is almost over. I think there's only 2 more rounds left to run this weekend and next weekend in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. But off the track, the carnage is still ongoing, with a lot of departures happening seemingly out of nowhere. And it's not just within the FIA either, because Damon Hill will be leaving his job at Sky Sports at the end of the season. Martin Brundle and David Cross futures are also under speculation as to whether they will leave or be moved on, and this is because of a conspiracy theory that people are being removed from their jobs because it's become illegal to criticise Max Verstappen, because his fans don't like that their guy is being criticised for whether it's something that happened at the Mexican Grand Prix or wherever. With further vitriol being directed at Johnny Herbert, who was one of the 4 men in the stewards room that handed out those 2 penalties at Mexico. One for squeezing Lando wide at the chicane, if you want to call it that, and then a further penalty, which was a bit more clear-cut, for straight up blowing turn 7 and sending Lando off into the runoff area. But since we're here, I'll offer some opinions on that, the Sky Sports bit that is. With regards to Damon and also to Martin, the pair of them are now in their 60s. Martin is 65, Damon is now 64, and if they are flying out to race after race after race with the longer calendar and bits and pieces like that, it's probably going to start catching up with them. Martin and Damon are around the same age and are probably reconsidering things because they have other things going on outside of Formula 1 and broadcasting that they might want to get done, and there's just not enough time in the day to get it all in. Now, someone did say on my Discord the other day, but didn't Murray commentate and do all that stuff until he was well into his 70s? Yes, he did. But Murray did between 16 and 18 races a season, mostly within Europe, and for a time, his commentary work will have been done from a studio at the BBC instead of being flown out to the Grand Prix. There's a few races from back in the day where he was commentating with James Hunt, and James would be flat out admitting that they weren't actually at the race. But we won't know much about Damon until he actually says why he left. Knowing Damon, it was probably his decision. Oh, and while I'm here, I've just been reminded that Martin has also had issues with his heart in recent years, so maybe that's got something to do with it. It's mad to think that I remember watching those 2, Martin and Damon that is, race, and Martin Brundle is probably the last connection to Murray Walker still on the television. Time's getting on, and I don't like it. But elsewhere, it seems that the president of the FIA has gone full Alan Sugar, saying, "You're fired," to a bunch of people, and it seems to have backfired ever so slightly. Niels Wittig was let go from his position in the 2nd week of November, with the BBC reporting that he'd left with immediate effect. Wittig, for a time, was splitting the job with Eduardo Freitas, as he and Freitas became the replacement for Michael Masi following the carnage at the end of the 2021 season, with it seeming quite odd that the race director would be let go with 3 or 4 races remaining of the season. Surely it would have been better for him to finish out the season and then replace him for the start of 2025. So the speculation began that Wittig had left his post through resignation, but Wittig had told German F1 reporter Christian Meneth that he had indeed been fired, and the FIA's statement was all they were going to give. No additional comments. The statement from the FIA read, "The FIA can confirm that Niels Wittig has stepped down from his position as F1 race director to pursue new opportunities. Niels has fulfilled numerous responsibilities as race director with professionalism and dedication. We thank him for his commitment, and we wish him the best for the future." Do you know what that reads like? One of those statements or generic statements that a local band will put out. There was a band sort of local to me a few years back. They just got signed to a label, and the drummer was on my Facebook friends list, and he was excited that the band had just been signed to a label. But like 3 or 4 days after that announcement, that drummer announced he was leaving the band to pursue other opportunities, and I wish the band the best in the future, and it was just the same generic stuff. And you think, 4 days after you got signed to a label, you were sacked, weren't you? So Wittig was replaced by Rui Marquez, the F2 race director, and a man who came in with a massive amount of experience. He's been a marshal, involved in scrutineering, he's been a steward at the national and international level, and a deputy race director and senior race director in various series and championships around the world. It seemed that he would be a good replacement for Wittig, seeing as this is the FIA's #1 series and needs everything doing properly and only hiring the best, at least in theory, people to do that job. Marquez was in turn replaced by Jeanette Tan, but before Jeanette could start her new job as the F2 race director, she too was sacked, and it means that Marquez will have to be F1 and F2 race director this weekend in Qatar. Apparently this is because of something to do with the Singapore Grand Prix and Tan's sort of working relationship with that particular Grand Prix. On top of this, Tim Mayer, one of the FIA's more experienced stewards, was also sacked this week. Mayer isn't exactly new to the whole stewarding thing. He's been around for at least 15 years and is one of F1's more experienced and respected stewards. But in recent weeks his name has become known to many people around the world because of his role in penalising Verstappen in Mexico, along with Johnny Herbert. This being because Tim's father, Teddy Mayer, was a co-founder of McLaren and the man who took over at McLaren when Bruce was killed, and helped build McLaren into a front-running and later championship-winning team. Because of that connection, there was uproar on social media after the Mexican Grand Prix, because Johnny Herbert was apparently being biased because the offence had been committed against a British driver, and Mayer was accused of being biased because his dad was once the McLaren boss. The mental gymnastics it's almost inspirational, but just like I was as a teenager, it looked like that Mayer had been dumped via text message. So much so that Mayer has now gone and talked to the BBC about it, and he's also annoyed that Tan has been removed from her job before she's even had the chance to start. He told the BBC, "She is the epitome of the type of person we want working for the FIA, the best of the next generation of race directors. I don't know the circumstances, but one would think they would work very hard to keep somebody of her character. There aren't a lot of platinum level FIA race directors, which is the FIA's highest level of certification. I'm one of them. It's a lot of work, and if you're doing the job right, you wake up every day with an ulcer thinking of all the various things you need to be thinking about. They're not doing themselves any favours. They are literally running out of people to do those jobs." And this is all part of an almost mass exodus of people from the FIA in the last 12 months. On top of Mayer, Tan and Wittig, as well as Compliance Officer Paolo Bassari, the FIA has also lost Sporting Director Tim Nielsen, Technical Director Tim Goss, Chief Executive Officer Natalie Robin, Head of Commission for Women Deborah Mayer, no relation, and Secretary General of Mobility Jacob Bansgaard. Oh, and Director of Communications Luke Skipper. Later in that same BBC article, Mayer addressed why he was let go from his voluntary job with the FIA. He said that President Mohammed Ben Sulayem was outraged by an appeal document filed at the US Grand Prix, which was due to the circuit being fined for a track invasion after the race ended. Basically, the officials at COTA were annoyed that they'd been fined €500,000, while a similar offence at the Canadian Grand Prix earlier this year was handled with a mere warning. Mayer, the sporting organiser of the 3 US Grand Prix in 2024, was the man who helped file the appeal. And because of that, it seems that Sulayem has taken exception to this, as Mayer was removed from his steward role at the Brazilian Grand Prix and now sacked entirely. Tan was the sporting organiser for the Singapore Grand Prix, so it looks like the two have been removed because it creates a conflict of interest. Mayer has been an organiser for the US Grand Prix since 2012 when it came back onto the calendar. Since then, he's become the sporting organiser for the Las Vegas and Miami Grand Prix too, and he's been a steward even longer still. So it was never a problem before, but it seems to be a problem now, but I don't know. Either way, it seems that Ben Sulayem has taken offence to an appeal that was filed regarding that fine for the US Grand Prix back at the, end of October, beginning of November. I can't remember when it was. Time is, it's just going on pretty quickly, isn't it? But yeah, it seems that Sulayem took offence to the appeal that he just simply presented. He didn't write it, he just presented it. There was no intention of trying to cause a problem with the FIA, and I will continue as the sporting organiser of the 3 US Grand Prix. This was such a minor point that it is baffling anybody would take such offence. COTA succeeded in having the language of the right of review verdict changed, removing a finding that organisers had failed to take reasonable measures. In US legalese, that is synonymous with negligence, which is problematic for a US corporate body. Following the right of review hearing, the stewards subsequently agreed with us and changed the penalty to breach of Article 26.7 of the F1 regulations, which states that no one is allowed in the track before all the cars are in the pits, which is a statement of fact. Some fans did reach the track. In the process, there were hurt feelings on behalf of the president, which I think is odd because there was no cause for his feelings to be hurt when everybody else dealt with this in a professional manner. And now the GPDA has weighed in once again. They were already at loggerheads with the FIA about certain things like underwear and jewellery and swearing, but now they're taking it a stage further. They had a meeting with the FIA in Qatar yesterday, so the 28th of November, with George Russell presenting things as he does as the chairman of the GPDA. Just when we've asked for a bit of transparency and consistency, we're getting rid of 2 highly important people in the governing body. It's kind of gone a full 360. We still don't have any reasoning for Neil's removal. I don't think anybody was informed about Tim leaving, and at the same time, the first I heard about the new race director doing Formula 2 was through the media. So naturally, in any organisation, if you've got people leaving or a change of personnel, it's never going to be a stable environment and people have to learn the new rules. And that's very challenging for any team, and it must be super challenging for everyone within the FIA right now. So, we'd love to get a little bit of clarity and understanding of what's going on and who's getting fired next. So, with that meeting that the drivers were having with the FIA, it all surrounded the updated guidelines for overtaking, which became a big talking point at the US Grand Prix in Austin and also after the Mexican Grand Prix, with FIA continuity steward Loic Bacallan admitting that the rules and guidelines are broken and that the flaws can be exploited. As we later found out, the rule essentially says, so long as you can get to the apex first, you have all rights to the corner, and it doesn't matter what happens to the other car. A rule that even the most ardent Max Verstappen disliker would say that he's mastered, with that whole, oops, my car won't turn into this corner anymore thing that we talked about after the Mexican and US Grand Prix. The outcomes from this meeting that took place yesterday will go into the 2025 sporting regulations to try and make things a bit simpler, and hopefully this will clear up any confusion surrounding penalties, with the FIA themselves being a bit more lenient with these guidelines, instead of treating them less like guidelines and more like black and white rules, which is something they've been doing recently, and will in effect make things like what happened at Austin end up with both drivers being penalised, one for forcing the other car off the track and one for overtaking off the track. But at the time of writing, nothing has been presented yet. And this is the stuff that we really need to be talking about, rather than people being booted off stewards panels because the president of the FIA got offended by somebody saying, why did the Canadians get a warning while we were fined for the same thing? We all have our own personal beliefs, whether that's the right to free healthcare, rejoining the European Union, gun rights, the economy, whatever it might be. But when you try to enact rules based on, I don't like this, then that starts riling people up the wrong way. The whole swearing thing, as an example, something that's kicked off in the last couple of months. I said before that there is a time and place for all of that. Out on track, by all means, F and Jeff all you want, microphone in front of a footballer Sebastian Vettel speech, etc. But in a press conference, it probably should be off limits because it's an official setting, for want of a better term. And 13 of the 20 drivers on the grid on Sunday will be speaking in mostly their second or third language, depending on where they're from. And if they do swear, a fine is enough. Or reduce it if they immediately apologise, which is what happened with Leclerc recently. But at the same time, Formula 1 has more pressing issues to sort out beyond drivers swearing, and getting really annoyed with it because personally you don't like it is just going to make everybody look at you in not the best fashion. And now the drivers are starting to hit back, going, you're coming after us for swearing, jewellery, and what underpants we've got on. What the hell? Does the Parents' Television Council still exist in the US? A bunch of busybodies who watch TV and then note down everything they don't like, and then they try to get those shows taken off the air simply because they don't like them. That attitude of, I don't like it, therefore I'm going to stop those that do enjoy this thing from being able to watch it. And they also think that just because Family Guy and South Park are cartoons, that they should be suitable for children. That's what the FIA feels like. But in turn, the FIA is turning into the old pro wrestling stable, The Right to Censor, who are basically a parody of the PTC. As it currently stands, the drivers are missing the days of Charlie Whiting, and that's understandable. Not only was Charlie very good at his job, although not perfect, he was somebody that the drivers connected with, and he listened to their concerns and suggestions. And the drivers felt valued as people and not just robots that turned up to compete. The drivers seem to be okay with Vitek as far as I can tell and how he handled things, but they now feel sorry for Marquez because he has to juggle 2 series, a job that Charlie used to do but then stopped because the workload was just too much, and it allowed him to focus on Formula 1 and just Formula 1. It's the hardest sport in the world to police, and consistency is key to making sure that the sport is run as fairly as it possibly can be, and it requires the cooperation of the drivers and those at the top to work together instead of being told, the only decision is my decision, Jean-Marie Balestri style. And they managed to get him to back down on a couple of occasions for that huge punch in the ego. But for consistency, this won't work well at all. If the FIA wants a solid foundation of race directors and stewards, hiring and firing on a whim and then offering no explanation as to why people have been fired isn't the way to go. And as Maya said, they're literally going to run out of people to do these jobs because they fired everybody that they can get to do the job, and then training people to replace them is just going to take far too long. It's not a 20-minute fix. So at the rate they're going, we might not have a sport left at all. So then, some opinions in the latest FIA background drama that's kicked off with a couple of rounds left to run, instead of kicking it off after the season has finished. If this thing has made you think things about the thing, then like this thing so I know I did a good job. And for more things from this thing, get the subscribe thing clicked and ring the bell thing so you never miss out on any thing that I do around here. Massive thanks as ever to the fine bunch of lads over at Patreon that continue to support me at a more personal level. If you want to help keep the lights on around here, a link to Patreon will be in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliate links and other bits and bobs you might want or need to know. It's Black Friday on the F1 store today. I'll have a pinned comment with an offer code in there, so if you need to get anything for your tolerated ones this Christmas, there you go. There's also super thanks down there for a one and done donation, and also memberships if you want to do Patreon without doing Patreon. So until next time, I've been Millward. Have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.